I do miss the rain though.
Nah, it's been dark for a couple of hours already.
Island of
I bet you
Scotland.
do. Yeah, I would. But yeah, I admit I miss winter. Somewhere's got to be. It's the winter is what I would miss. I think if I moved anywhere else.
Yeah, it's for sure. Like, I mean, we're kind of blessed in Britain, aren't we? Because we see all 4 seasons. Granted, summer isn't exactly very hot, but we do see all 4 seasons, and it's pretty strong in all 4 of them. And like, I don't know, like we're in summer now, and we've just come through winter, and I'm like, where's winter gone? Like, it got to, I think the coldest day was like 4 degrees, and I'm still like sweating me tits off. I'm like, 4 degrees. Come on, this is like the middle of summer.
Exactly. That's a good summer day up here in the Highlands, mate. 4 degrees. I'd take that.
All right, mate. So I really appreciate you coming on. Like, literally, you are the godfather of European CrossFit and have been for when God was a lad. How did you get started in this, mate? This whole crazy journey and then scooting off around the world. I know was it 3D you started way back in the day? Yeah, I believe so. Which is a really cool gym, really cool hangar. Was it the first one in the north or the northwest?
No, it was so 3D was actually our second gym.
Oh, wow.
We left the original one in the north was CrossFit Manchester, which I started with a buddy of mine in 2006, and we split off from there to start off with just me and my missus in 2009, and that was 3D, and we owned that all the way through until 2017, 16, 17, something like that.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know CrossFit Manchester was first. I thought 3D was first. What made you start it, mate? What made you start CrossFit? Did you see it on that, like on a Reddit page where you're just like, I'll jump into it, or was it the media hype, or what was it? What made you start?
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was no media hype about it back then. I mean, my first CrossFit workout was 2003. So you had the homepage of CrossFit.com, right? And then, but it was a buddy of mine that actually put me onto that. I'd been in the fitness industry since I've been 19. So that was a long time ago without giving the game away. But I got my first trainer qualifications there. And then I worked in all the facets of kind of like a regular gym environment. So local authority gyms, and then spent a couple of years working for David Lloyd. I left there and then started working for corporate gyms as well. So I worked in Canary Wharf for a long time. And at that point, I just got a little bit disillusioned with the regular gym model, didn't really vibe with it too much. Wasn't really my bag. So I was pretty much a bit done with the whole fitness industry. And it was at that time that a buddy of mine was, he was doing a lot more kind of wacky stuff. I'm like, what's he up to? He'd be using club bells and, using a lot more sandbags. And he was an old, like an MMA dude, like an old Russian, not Russian, a Greco-Roman wrestler was his passion. And he was, he'd always be like, oh, come and do this bit of training, come and do that bit of training. And we were tinkering around with different training methodologies until one day where he said, hey, look, there's a group of folks over in the US that are doing like what we're trying to do, but much better. And he said, like, check it out. And that began the journey, really. I logged on to CrossFit. I like the vibe behind it. I like the fact that it was very much counter to everything else. So that kind of attracted me, coming from the old heavy metal listening, skateboarding, BMX background that I did as well, where it's very much kind of like, it was very standoffish. It was the kind of the counterculture that attracted me, to be fair. But also the training was savage. And I was, when I started looking into it a lot more, it had a lot of buy-in from folk whose lives pretty much depended on them actually being fit, not just show fit or not just being out to run, but being out to be just, as we know, being fit. So yeah, that began the journey. I had a little lurk around for a couple of months trying to figure it out, like, what's this all about? Like when you just see 5x5 back squat posted and you're like, is that it? That what you're doing today? And And then so yeah, dipped my toe in the water and got my toe quite effectively wrenched off, I think, by the workout. And yeah, that began the journey really of just trying to figure it out and navigating it. And yeah, that began it really. So from about 2003, 2004 onwards, it became the sole way that I trained. And then decided to go for my level 1 in 2005 with a buddy who, ironically enough, I met online through the CrossFit message board. He was all the way up in Glasgow and I was down in southeast London, North Kent. But we stayed in touch and he was like, oh, I want to go out and get my level 1. And I was like, yeah, I'll go do that with you too. So we went and did that in, I think it was September. I want to say September 05. And then came back and I was like, hell yeah, this is what I want to do. You know, so that began the process of trying to figure out what a box would look like, you know, like there weren't any to go off of in the UK. So we were like, well, we'll just try and replicate what we saw in the US as best we can. Steep learning curve. And yeah, there was another buddy who obviously through the message board as well, because there was about, I don't know, a grand total of 10 people in the UK were doing CrossFit. So we all knew each other, at least online. And so another one of the guys, Mark, was looking to set up. And he said it was a bit of a reach on his own, but he was committed and he wanted to do it. And I was very much at a crossroads in my life, just got married, didn't want to be in the fitness industry anymore. So I had a couple of paths to go down. It was either go and join the forces, or it was fully commit to the CrossFit thing. So I decided to give the CrossFit thing a go, and it ended up being all right. You know, it kind of like took over my life. And from 06 onwards, that was it, pretty much full-time CrossFit affiliate owner and trainer.
What did the model look like at the box back then compared to now? Because like you get they're so complex now. You can have like dual room systems. You can have like where they start on the half hour and they basically just filter them through. You have like the competitive boxes. Like you go into some box and you're like, holy fuck, this is like a conveyor belt system where you get through so many people. And like, what did it look like back then?
It was very much the old school that I still hold true to now. I think, mate, it was small room. I mean, it was in the original box was you had to go down some steps into like a dungeon. It was an old dust flue of a cotton mill. So the floor wasn't level. Yeah. So if you like threw a barbell from overhead away from you, it would roll back down the gym to you. It also had like the soil pipe, so the crap pipe from the unit upstairs used to run through the gym as well. So whenever somebody flushed the loo, it would come rocketing through, you know. So it was you had to have the music up loud.
Oh, I love it.
And so we had that going, but it was very much trying to establish just a couple of classes a day. We didn't really do any morning classes. We did one. All of our stuff was in the evening, and so we just filled those up with some PT clients and boot camp clients that we kind of had existing. And then we just built the membership up from there. We had a sandwich board out front, which advertised, free training for like 2 weeks, because we were just a bit sick of folk coming in and going like, is this a gym? What is it? And so instead of us, having to go through the same 60-second elevator pitch at CrossFit, then we just decided the easiest thing was, no obligation, come train with us for 2 weeks. And if you want to sign up after, you can, but if you haven't, at least you've had 2 weeks worth of free training. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we just kind of played that game. And as a result of it, it worked really well because it was just classic, turn up, warm up, practice the specific skills for that day, do the workout, then go home, because there was the sport didn't exist then, right? The games was still like 2-3 years away from being anywhere near even in an idea. So there was no one who was particularly interested in the competitive side. It was an entirely a lifestyle fitness program. So as a result of it, we didn't perhaps have to come up against the expectations of more competitively minded CrossFit athletes who were like, well, where's my sexy EMOM or my 7,000 workouts a day? Like those things just didn't exist. We were all just trying to figure out the best way of applying the baseline model, like work out once a day and figure out the rest, and then just try and generate a badass community, right? That was the main drive, I guess. We were lucky in that regard.
How many members did you end up starting off with, and then how many did the original gym grow to?
Oh, we had about, to start off with, because we probably had about 11 people that were committed to it, because we started by trying to grow the number. So as we didn't start from zero, we had like cobbled together some gear, and what we did was we basically rented out a school hall every Wednesday evening, and we just said, hey, like punched out to the people that we knew in the area who were playing around with that, and some PT clients and some old boot camp that Mark had from his previous job. And we were like, hey, we're going to start doing this a bit more regularly. All we ask is like we cover the overheads of the rent for the hour. So we weren't really charging anything for it. It was just kind of like seeing if there would be a market for us, really. And so we started that off. And then over a period of time, that moved from like, it wasn't just Wednesday, it was Wednesday, Thursday. And then we added a Tuesday. And then we had like a regular crowd that were turning up. And so we floated the idea to that crowd, was like, hey, if we had a dedicated facility for this, then we could do this like all the time. But to cover those overheads, we're probably going to have to charge more than a regular gym membership. And this is what we're looking at, and kind of floated those numbers about. And everyone was like, yeah, rock and roll, I'm in. So we kind of took that as like a gentleman's agreement that we had a certain amount of income right from the get-go, which was super helpful. And then we just kind of grew it as we built it. So if we got more members, then that meant, like we thought, oh, if we've got another 2 members this month, great. That means we can go and get another barbell, or we can go and, in 3 months time, we can go and get another Concept 2 rower. Cause they were as rare as rocking horse shit back then, because there was no rogues. There was no CrossFit equipment provider. It was just all, you scoured eBay for bargains and try to figure out best bumper plates that didn't destroy themselves after one go. And so, yeah, there was a lot of growing as we went, like we started with the bare bones and then just tried to add to it as we went, really invested all of it into it. And I was lucky that my wife was in full-time work at the time. So that just meant she could provide the wage for us. And then I just basically kept my head down and grew the business. And then that eventually managed to flip flop, but that was many years down the line.
But that's usually the case, though, isn't it? Like whether it's the female supporting the male or the male supporting the female, and then it ends up, if you go 100% and commit, it ends up switching over, and and then it's time for the other one to have a little pop at whatever.
Yes, it's a good relationship that way, right? Where you support each other. Yep.
Oh yeah, for sure. So then, like, what was the initial spark and the initial fire for then you to start really stripping back the coaching, and start progressing up through the levels and being a bit of a student for the game that way?
Yeah, to be honest, I was always a big like sit there and reflect as to where I messed up or where I could improve. Do you know what I mean? Like I was always surrounded by folk, especially when I moved into the more corporate world. Everyone I worked with had like degrees in strength and conditioning or exercise science, and that was great. But they weren't that great coaches, because they were all about the theory. They weren't really about the practical application. And I came through the other end, which was getting all my stuff through practical application and then adding the knowledge as I went, which I knew I would need. But I think a lot of it was just reflecting on where my holes were, like what other facets were there. I didn't know much about Olympic lifting. So what do? Well, you go and do it, but you also go learn about it. Like I learned like sandbag training. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I went down the rabbit hole of utter shite as well by, doing spin qualifications and fitball stuff. And I mean, they were all fun and stuff, but you know what I mean? They were a little bit faddish. And so, you spend a lot of time actually learning and applying, but most of the stripping into the CrossFit style coaching was just like realizing, you have to, because the movements are so much more complex, arguably, than a lot of the other stuff, especially if you come from a Globo gym environment. I mean, even when you're teaching free weights, it's kind of buckshy free weights, isn't it? It's like, chest flies and seated dumbbell shoulder press. I mean, it's not particularly complex. And so when you start going into the nuances of people coming to you as a coach and they're like, hey, teach me how to do kipping pull-ups, teach me how to do a strict ring muscle up, teach me how to do a barbell snatch. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I better have that knowledge and experience of myself, so you strip that back and start analyzing. And when it comes to the group side of coaching, it was more about sitting there and reflecting as to, okay, cool. Well, where did I spend most of my time in that last class? Okay. Why did they take so much of my attention, and why didn't I get around everybody equally? because I'd be sat there and I'd be like, well, logic dictates that I spend all my time with the more out to lunch movers, right? So, because there's more risk associated there, but everybody's paying the same rate here. So I'm like, I felt like a turd if I'd spent all my time, like just because somebody didn't get a movement didn't mean that they should have got more of my time than somebody who did. They all require equal attention. So there was a lot of sitting there and reflecting and being like, well, it's not the fault of the athlete for not moving well. I've just got to be able to, like, as we know now, the phrase was obviously like triage harder and be able to give them more effective feedback and then make my way around that class more effectively. So as everybody gets attention rather than just one or two. And so I think a lot of that was a lot of on reflection and trying to get better. Time in trade, you're coaching hours every day. So you get better at teaching, seeing and correcting. Mm. And then, going on the CrossFit Level 2 course was awesome. It was like a massive, trial by fire. It still is. I mean, it's a lot nicer now. I'll be honest. It's a lot nicer now in terms of the feedback. When I went on mine, like people were getting ripped apart, like just, there was no real kind of sugarcoating stuff. It was just like, no, that was utter shit, like do that better. And here's how. And so, it was like 80% failure rate on the level 2, because it was what's akin to the level 4 now. So we had on our course about 30 folk, and I think only about 6 people passed the entire course. Wow. So that was a lot of people getting shot down and told that they were crap. But that was it was constructive though. Don't get me wrong. They weren't just getting told they were shit. It was all about like, hey, here's what you need to do to get better. So there was a lot of constructive feedback, but yeah, you definitely needed to turn up wearing a thick skin, because they just wanted to see whether you could apply it or not. There's that, if you think you're the biggest dog in the yard, then, there's always a bigger dog, right? So always. When it comes to coaching, you have to have feedback. Yeah. Right. So you have to have feedback, and you can't, I think it's the old adage, right? Like the more that you learn, the less that you realize, and the most humble coaches I've ever come across are the ones that arguably are the best ones, weirdly enough. And so I'd always think like, well, why is that? And I think it's because they realize that when it comes to coaching and dealing with like humans, there's very rarely any absolutes. So I'm always very wary of when somebody says like, no, like, Mandalorian, this is the way. And you're like, it can be a way, and it probably is the most effective way that you found, but you should always be open and receptive. And that's what I've always tried to be with the coaching and the feedback. I think is just open and receptive to everything, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it challenges your ideals, because that's the only way that you grow. I mean, if you just sit there and think that you're hot shit, then ironically you're not, but also you'll stop growing,
I feel like that's the beauty in coaching though, isn't it? Because you're like investigating and trying to be able to dissect things, and then you can do exactly the same process for you as an individual and get the right answer. And you're like, oh yes, come on, I'm spot on. Then you move on to the next one. You do exactly the same thing because exactly the same thing is wrong, and it's completely different. You're like, oh, okay. Now I'm gonna have to strip it back. And it's I find that's the beauty in coaching, because you're able to sort of express yourself in the same movement that you're trying to be able to teach, but in like 1,000,001 different ways for 1,000,001 different minds.
That's right.
Yeah, like it's interesting. You basically got to be like a Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing, right? People learn and take on board information all kinds of different ways too, right? So that's why we talk about like, not only have you got to be able to put things across verbally, and verbal is great, but things that have seen me off in the past are when people don't understand a damn word that you're talking about, right? So if I go and work in Europe, and like way back in the day, you get dropped into a seminar and you've got no translator, and you're surrounded by a group of people, and they're like, all right, you got an hour to teach these guys squats. And then you're like, morning, everybody, how are you? And you get nothing back. You're like, well, fuck. I guess my words aren't really going to be too helpful here. So then you just end up being like, well, what else have I got? I've got to be super visual now then, right? So super visual, super direct with my actions, giving some targets like tactile cueing and stuff, like you just have to be super visual. So it's one of those things where it's very challenging. I think not only do people have like their individual ways of learning, so some are more visual, some are more verbal, some need tactile, all that kind of good stuff. But we as coaches as well have our favorite ways of doing stuff, right? And it's amazing where you're like, if you deny somebody their favorite way of, seeing and correcting as an example, right? So if they're the super handsy coach and they're just always grabbing their athletes and moving them into position and kind of like they're just the super handsy coach, you watch them rapidly melt down when you say like, no, stand 2 meters away, COVID, right? Stand 2 meters away and then actually try and impact their movement just with your actions and your words. And they're like, because they can't. And when you explain why that's a valid metric, because you're like, every time you have to go super handsy with an athlete, your attention's on them, great, but your attention is not on 99% of the rest of your class. So perhaps there's levels there that you might want to roll with, right? So verbal and visual fixes or corrections are by far and away your first go-to, because you can fire them out and get multiple hits and try and get some feedback and impact more of your class. And then maybe you save like that tactile thing for your problem cases where you really have to dig a little deeper, rather than that just being your first go-to. And I think as soon as you can start giving people a mindset of how to fix multiple things in multiple different ways, then that's where they end up being that super talented coach, right? Where they just seem to walk in and they fire something out. If that doesn't work, it's not panic, because they've got 5 other different strategies already ready to rock, you know? So it's just like they've got a deeper toolkit, I guess, tool bag to be able to fire it out.
What would you say like would be your piece of information to be able to, because you need confidence to be able to do that, right? Especially in your own ability and being able to manage a class. What would you say to an early coach, an upcoming coach, for someone that doesn't have like a massive amount of confidence in themselves to be able to do that, to like calm themselves down for a second and then being able to conduct the class? Like, what would you say to them?
Oh, that's a fun one. I think, do you know what I think most people appreciate most is honesty, weirdly enough. Like one of the biggest things I ever saw was like, I saw EC Sinkowski. She's no longer on the seminar staff, but she does like the 800 grams challenge and stuff, like super knowledgeable trainer and really seasoned veteran with this stuff. And she was running a group and I was watching it. I can't remember whether I was delivering feedback or I was just, we were doing anyway, whatever. I was watching her execute this thing. And she was like, hey, what did you see about this person moving? She was running one of the active classrooms like we do on the level 1 and the level 2. And she was like, hey, what do you think about this? And someone was like, oh, I didn't see that. I saw this. And EC was like, oh, I totally didn't see that. Let's watch again. And then she watched, she was like, oh yeah, you're totally right. And actually that's more important. So yeah, let's dig into that. And I thought that just showed such good like authenticity and accountability for like this red shirt trainer who everybody seems to think is like this mutts nuts level, and they are. But to just be like, oh yeah, I totally didn't see that, but yeah, that's right. Or just to be able to be like, oh yeah, cool. Or to have the awareness and the integrity, if I'm honest, to be like, oh, I just don't know. Or to have, see somebody move and just be like, yeah, something's up here with your movement, but I can't get my finger on it. Give me a minute. Or like, let me see a few more reps or something like that. And I think that shows a level of humility and integrity that I think everybody could identify with. Like no one expects you to be perfect. Just like if you're a CrossFit trainer, nobody expects you to be the games champ. No one gives a shit. All they want to do is like, are you invested in them trying to be better? And so if you're just like, yeah, something's up, I can't quite put my finger on it, but give me a minute and I'll, we'll keep exploring. There's no member in the world is going to be like, dickhead. They're going to be like, oh, appreciate that. Thanks. Like, appreciate the honesty. So I think just be authentic and be honest right from the get-go, and your skill set will improve. I remember coming back from my level 2 and being like, hey gang, just come back from my level 2. And like, you know how I've been teaching you how to do the push press for the last sort of 2 years? And they were like, yeah. I was like, well, it's totally shit. I got a brand new one. I got taught at the weekend. Like, let's do this instead. And everyone's like, all right, sounds fine. Like I think it's only when you try and bullshit and you get found out, just like in life, right? If you only try and bullshit and get found out, I think that's when people are like, they get the stink eye out and you lose credibility, I think. So if you don't know, just say you don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
But be like, but we'll
Exactly. And we'll work it together. And it's like the synergy between the coach and the class. And like, people do respect when you go, hey, like, I might have a limitation on like shoulder mobility or overhead mobility. So I'm coaching, but I might be demoing a little bit different, just to let you know. And it's kind of that communication between the class. Yeah, 100%, mate, 100%. That really like poses like sort of a very fresh problem at the moment, especially with the games and everyone. It's a bit fancy, hairy fairy in it. We watch all the documentaries and we're just like, these are like aliens. They're just being able to do some incredible things. They're machines. And you do get, you know,
Yeah.
maybe sometimes a couple people, a couple thoughts where it's just like, oh, well, you know, why aren't you games level sort of athlete? And I'm like, well, you know, that's a coach and an athlete. It's completely separate. So how would you be able to, like, I don't know, how do you, I guess it's the dynamic and the community more than anything else. Do you think the sport of CrossFit and the methodology should be into one piece, or do you think you should be a little bit of a separation?
You know, I mean, they both exist under the banner of CrossFit, right? It's so, and people have different goals. You know, I still believe that the vast majority of folk are actually more interested in CrossFit for the benefits that it brings to their regular life. But that doesn't mean that there's still not a huge contingent of CrossFit of CrossFitters that are interested in using it as their competitive sport. And both are cool. I think the danger is often when you try and pigeonhole folk into either or when they don't want to be, or they're a bit confused as to where they sit. So the major thing is, like, if you want to be competitive in CrossFit, then that's cool. You go do your thing, you know. But I mean, there's an element of, are you ready to be there, right? So, you know, like if you're talking to me about wanting to go and compete in CrossFit beyond the open as a community thing, and you've got like an 8-minute Fran and 10 rounds of Cindy, then I'm probably going to say that you just need to sit down for a minute. You know what I mean? It's like there's an element of there's some steps to get to before you're competitive in CrossFit, you know, like just some bare minimums. But beyond that, you know, like, hey, you want to go and be competitive, Len? I'm not going to rain on your parade. Go ahead and do it. But maybe you just give them some stepping stones to be like, hey, these are probably the things that you need to have in your future. Like, to be competitive in CrossFit, you know, you need to at the very minimum have a sub 5-minute Fran. I mean, realistically, it should be sub 3 if you're looking to compete in the sport, right? And you go, and above that, you're then going to have, here's some lift parameters that you probably need to have, and here's some gymnastic parameters that you probably need to have. So rather than just being like, you shouldn't do it, even though I don't want to compete in CrossFit, that's not my bag. I'm the lifestyle dude. I'm not going to rain on somebody else if that's their drive. I'm just going to give them the stepping stones to get there. But then with everybody else, that, you know, like ones that want to compete and they feel like they're getting pigeonholed into it, then I'm going to be like, you know, you don't have to, right? It's, you can just turn up, do your one workout a day and high five some folk, maybe from a social distance at the minute, but you can still do your thing, and then go about and like live a really good quality of life just on that. And I think it's just having that further chat. Like, what do you want out of the program? If you want it to live a more badass life, then it'll do that for you. And you don't need to savage yourself hours after hour after hour in the gym. Like, you can literally do that on 1 hour a day and you'll be fine. Like, not even. I mean, I'm just including warm-ups and cool downs, but like realistically, it's half hour's worth of effort a day, and I'll give you some world-class damn fitness. Well, I won't, but CrossFit has, right? Yeah. Whereas if you want to be competitive, then yeah, you're probably going to be spending a lot of time in the gym. You're going to be putting in a lot of sacrifice like you would do in any other sport, you know, like you're going to be tracking your food, you're going to be tracking your sleep, you're going to be doing lots of different efforts all over the time. You're probably going to be training multiple times a day and in the gym for hours. And, you know, you're going to have to sacrifice social life, and you might have to be a little selfish in your endeavors, because that's what it takes to be great at any individual sport, right? So I think a lot of it is just, they all exist under the banner. And I think the sport has pushed the methodology just like the methodology has driven the sport. So they kind of like, they go hand in hand, and they both exist in CrossFit, and they're both super cool. I mean, I love watching the games. Those guys and girls are fucking mute. What they can put up with is bonkers. And I love it, you know, just seeing what the human body is capable of, you know, and it's really good. But on the same vein, I fully recognize that that's like the Olympics, and I like to just go out on a weekend jog. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's those different things. The weekend jog is still going to give me fitness, but I don't need to train like an Olympian, you know, because it's just those different goals and different parameters in the program. So I think as long as you're having good open dialogue with the people in your gym and the people you train, then you can pretty much just figure out where they're at and be like, sometimes it's nice to take, you can see the pressure come off them where it's like, yeah, I'm getting ready to compete. And you're like, you know, you don't have to, right? And they're like, really? Okay. I mean, I can just turn up and train and enjoy the process. And you're like, yeah, that's totally good. Like,
that's the point.
Totally allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what I mean. I have to kind of remove myself from myself, because that's my goals, right? My goals are not to compete in it. I just love being useful. You know, like I train to be useful. I train to to know that I can do anything and apply my hand to anything, that's totally fine. That's why I train. But for others, they're like, no, I need to have a goal to train for. You know, I've never really got that, because training was the goal for me. You know what I mean? Like, it's the process is what keeps me fit. But for others, they're like, no, for me to get my head right, I have to train for something. So if that's going to be a competition or a local 10K or a powerlifting meet or whatever the hell it may be, like, some folk are just driven that way. They can't kick themselves up the arse unless they've got that micro goal in the future to go for, you know?
Yeah. Some people need something to chase, don't they? Instead of like actually just running the race. Like, I'm exactly the same as you. Like, I love something to chase after, like coming from a sport background. Like, I love that sort of competitive side. However, like, I am more than happy with just a day-to-day slog. Like, I think I like the grind more than the actual like result.
I agree.
And then some people, you know, are the flip, and they're like, if you don't give them that reward, they will literally not get out of bed, which is, you know, who are we to say it's wrong? It's just being able to like then adapt it to that type of athlete.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. I mean, I always remember in my mind, like, there's just a phrase where if you like, tough people do tough things. So, you know, and that's a perishable skill. Like, if you want to be a little bit more resilient as a human being, which I think a lot of the human race could do with, I mean, that's just my personal biases. But I think if you need to be a bit more resilient and a bit more, you know, hard, basically, to coin a UK phrase, then you need to be developing that every day. You know, like, some folk are hard. I get that, right? But that's generally due to their life. You know, like, their life was hard and it bred resilience and it bred toughness because they were having to get up and do daily tasks they didn't really fucking want to. And life's a lot easier now. So I think I always chased down stuff that just made me a bit more resilient, whether it was going to be physically or mentally, because, you know, just I try to make myself do stuff that I don't like really enjoy that much, you know, like throwing myself in cold water every day. I mean, I don't really want to do that, but the buzz of overcoming that and making myself a bit more physically and mentally resilient is great. Same with training. Like, the days where I really don't want to, like at the moment, because it's like fucking 2 degrees in the gym, is like, those days where I overcome that, get the graft on, get it done. And I get it done in the morning too, because again, it's a time where I really don't want to do it. Overcoming that little bit of adversity on a daily basis, it just makes you a bit more resilient. And I think that needs to be trained and put into folk a little bit more, you know, rather than just accepting comfort all the time.
Yeah, like everything in modern life is designed to make you comfortable, right? And we've kind of like ended up sitting down in that, and then in that space, and we don't like to dip our toe out of the water, to coin a phrase that you used earlier. Like, people don't like to be uncomfortable. And I don't know. I think I'm exactly the same as you. I think there's a lot of benefit, and it's a beautiful place. It's definitely funny when you watch a class. They go through that sort of dialogue in themselves. It's like, well, I could quit now, and I'd be somewhat comfortable in about 30 seconds to a minute, or I could keep pushing myself, and I'm gonna really hate this coach for about 5 to 10 minutes, but afterwards I'm gonna be all right. And it's I don't know. It's really pretty to see.
Exactly, it is. And I have faith in the fact that the vast majority of people actually do want that graft and that little element of misery to a degree, because if they didn't, then like the human race wouldn't have developed. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a point where it's like, I get it, comfort to a point, but the human race would have dropped off the face of the earth a long time ago if it just kind of only chased comfort and didn't push for a little bit of adversity every now and again. So more often than not, don't get me wrong, in my time in coaching, there's definitely been people who are just like, as soon as it even gets remotely miserable, their foot comes off the pedal and they're like, no, I'm working really hard. And you're like, no, mate, you really fucking ain't. I know what it looks like when people are working hard and you're not, but I'm not mad at you. If that's your level of intensity that you can bring in, that feels tough, then you do your thing. But realistically, no, it isn't. And then you've got other folk who will just literally put themselves like neck deep in misery right from the get-go, and you're like fair enough, and they're all in, you know, just chase it. They know that the worth is on the other side. And so the vast majority of folk, you've got to figure out how to motivate them, right? Like we were talking about previously, but you can definitely, the vast majority of folk will pull the pin when necessary. I think it's a pretty cool thing about most humans.
Yeah, it's, you get inside the head and you're like, all right, what's going to make this lad or lady tick? And then what's going to be able to get that extra 1% or even a half or a shaving out of them more today than they thought they'd be able to do. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. Well, how do you feel like your handle on everyday stress, or say, for example, a big event comes up in life that absolutely takes a sledgehammer and smacks you in the face with it, and just be like, oh, Karl, yeah, I'm life and I'm going to sit you down. Like, how do you think you are like prepared for that, having put in yourself in those uncomfortable environments like the cold water, like the workouts?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it's a degree of you train your head to be able to still do a task, right? So no matter how miserable anything might be externally, or a situation might be, or a workout, or whatever it may be, that's directly transferable to life, ain't it? Because you just kind of go, well, yeah, it's miserable and it's fucked and I don't really like it too much, but there's still a task to be accomplished. And so, if it's a life situation, which happens all the time, yeah, anybody who lives a super comfortable life, damn, like, what does that look like? Everyone's going to have some degree of adversity pop up in varying degrees. And whenever they do, you just go like, oh, okay, well, how do I make this suck less? How do I find my way out of this situation? Or if it doesn't look like there's an end to it, then it's just, how do I keep going forwards? Like, do I just sit down there like and suck my thumb? Well, nothing's going to really get accomplished there and it's not going to end. So you just got to keep finding the way out of it. So I think I'm lucky in that regard as well, that, my wife is a long time CrossFitter as well, and is exactly the same way. And so ironically enough, when she said that she was struggling with childbirth, even, she was like, she just, in her head, she was like, oh, it's just like a Tabata interval. I've got a period of time where I've got to work, then I've got to breathe and try and get my breath back, and then I go again. So in her mindset, she was still using strategies that even the style of training had given her, which was mildly bonkers, but it seemed to work.
Yeah, for sure. Like being in the gym, you forge that toughness mentally that you need in everyday life. You need outside of the gym, and like it's hard to get people to buy into. Yo,
There he is. He's back.
oh, lost me. You still got me?
All right there, bud. I think
Yeah.
your connection dropped.
Yeah,
you were there 1 minute, gone the next.
Booted out. What was I saying? I was saying how it's hard to get people to buy in to the fact that, hey, going through this little bit of pain physically is then going to benefit you mentally. It's going to help. I would never use that example of your wife. Maybe if it was my wife, but I would never be like, oh yeah, this is going to help you with childbirth, because they're going to be like, fuck you. But for stresses in jobs, corporate world, all that sort of stuff, like
the best ones.
yeah. Especially from the ladies, they'll be like, yeah, jog on, mate. How do you get people to buy into the fact that, hey, suffer now and live the rest of your life a champion, to use Muhammad Ali as a quote?
Yeah, it's for some folk, it's entirely like, how do you talk to anybody about anything? I think a lot of the time as trainers, our job is to remove barriers, no matter what they are, right? So barriers for learning a new movement, barriers for, learning a skill, or working a little harder in a workout, and even, removing barriers for getting people into the training methodology, even to start with, right? So like, what's stopping you? Like, what's your fears about it? And let me help you with it. Like, just asking those questions, generally you can start to dig in a little bit. Well, I think everybody's going to laugh at me. Nah, totally bollocks. like come and watch a class, and you'll see the camaraderie, and you'll see that nobody really cares what loads you lift or the times you do. And, like as soon as you can start digging in and asking those questions as to like, well, what's stopping you from doing it right now? What's the fears? And we can discuss these things. Then you can then start giving them the strategies to overcome them. Right. So, I need to go away and get fit. No, man, come and watch one of our classes again, and you'll see that there are all levels of fitness in this class, or whatever it may be, or yeah, I'm afraid of whatever it may be. It's generally those kind of things, or it's generally preconceptions about the training program. Like more often than not, whenever I've had even the most vocal, believe it or not, right, there's some folk out there that don't like CrossFit, and that's fine. I've got no problem if they just come across and they're like, hey, do you know what? I just don't like CrossFit. And I'm like, fair enough. At least you're honest. But more often than not, if they want to try and validate it by saying, because X, Y, Z, then normally I'm like, well, let's dig into that, because I don't agree with you. Like it's the validations aren't normally there, other than they just don't like it for some reason, and you're like, oh, okay, cool. But if they want to try and argue about certain factors of it, then you're like, well, that's fine. I'll take you down the rabbit hole, because I'm lucky enough that I've got the degree of knowledge that can back that up now. So, and a bit of experience in the trade too. So like, sure, like, what's your problem? They're like, I remember one guy like, oh yeah, the kipping pull up is super destructive of the shoulders. And I'm like, well, it's not really, like you build the prerequisite strict strength, and then you build like an opening and closing of the shoulder. I'm like, how is that destructive of the shoulder? And when I dug a little deeper into the conversation, he was totally on about the butterfly. And I'm like, well, yeah, no one really teaches that, like some folk may choose to skip right the way past all of the basics and start doing butterflies until their shoulders are hanging off. But at no point are you ever taught, like, don't do any strict work, don't do any regular kip, and go straight into butterfly. That might be somebody's individual decision, but at no point are you ever taught that shit. That's like, hey, build some strict strength, do some kip and pull-ups, then do butterfly. That's going to be like right the way across the board. And he was like, oh, okay. And we're like, he said, yeah, but you teach the butterfly on the level 1. I'm like, have you been on a level 1? And he's like, no. And I went, well, I know, because otherwise you wouldn't have said that, because we don't even mention it, I don't think. You're like, it's no. So whenever you start actually stripping away the layers, a lot of the time it's normally, oh, a friend told me X, or, oh, I've heard Y. And you're like, yeah, Roger. So it's normally like, get those barriers for entry, and then be like, well, okay, let me see if I can help you overcome them. And I mean, I think that's where a lot of CrossFit's biggest work actually has to be from now on. We don't have to convince fit people that CrossFit works, because every fit fucker's already doing CrossFit. They might not call it CrossFit, but they're all doing the methodology, right? It's that, or, a bastardized version. They're all doing the methodology to a different degree. And people who already want to be fit and chase the levels of human performance. The biggest challenge for us is, folk whose worst nightmare is a CrossFit gym, or a gym generally. And here's the irony, there are more of them. There's more of them in the world than there are people that are active. And so, that's our biggest challenge. If we truly want to go and help folk, then we have to find ways of how do we reach folk in places which is going to make them more able to do it. And I genuinely think, actually, weirdly enough, this medium is a bit of a godsend and a bit of a bonus that comes out of COVID, because you can reach people in their houses, and so therefore they don't actually have to. I mean, don't get me wrong, the fit people and the ones that are already married into the community are already mad for, and they're like, get me back in my damn box, But the vast majority of people that I've come across as well, and done a lot of coaching on Zoom now as well, they're like, actually, I really fucking like just being out to fire up my computer, grab a set of dumbbells, and have somebody take me through a workout, get a bit hot and sweaty, and be done. And like, I don't have to travel anywhere, and it fits in with my lifestyle, and I'm really happy with it. And I've actually had more people join and do CrossFit sessions for the first time in lockdown, maybe because they've got more time to do it. There are like multi-factors there, but the fact that it was in this less intense, less surrounded by other folk environment actually was a good removal of a big barrier for entry for people who are like, I don't want to be surrounded by, shirts off, like scary young punk alphas doing workouts. Maybe I can just do it in the comfort of my own home, where nobody gives a shit what I look like, and they can't see me do anything, and I've only got to work with my coach. And it's like, I think that's the that could be the way forward, that we actually try and help more folk. Because if you're a trainer, that's all you want to do. I mean, I don't give a crap about getting someone to the games or any of that other stuff. That's cool, but that's not really what gets you out of bed in the morning and gets you, opening up the doors of your gym and training folks. So I think that's how do we get to those folk is the next challenge for us as CrossFit trainers, because we've already got the fit ones.
Yeah, for sure. Like the word's got out now, we're a couple years deep. People know of CrossFit, especially when every shirt has a massive word of CrossFit, right, written on the front or the back or both. There you go. He's wearing it. Love it. But it is difficult, because especially like walking through the roller doors, like it's quite intimidating. You walk in, there's sweat everywhere, there's chalk everywhere. People have got their shirts off, they're slapping each other on their ass and giving them a high five and just like, good job. There's a whiteboard and you walk in, you're like, what the fuck is this? Like this looks carnage. It is hard to, buy people in, but I think the best thing I've seen on the floor, not about the Zoom, but on the floor, is like being able to watch sessions. Like, I think that is the best tool ever. Just, hey mate, just sit down, sit on the couch, chill out, grab yourself a coffee if you want. Like, fucking make them a coffee for free. It's a couple of coffee beans. You'll be okay. Your business won't go down. You'll be all right. And they'll just, sit there and watch. And if they don't want to join, that's cool. But they've had a good experience and people talk, and they're just gonna, leave. I think I listened to a podcast. This was years ago with CrossFit Louvre, where they have have like a massive book with everyone's like details in, who's ever like spoke to anyone from CrossFit Louvre or been in and out of it or been a member and left or whatever. And they all still get updates and offers via email. So they're all part of their online community. And I think that's a really, really interesting sort of thing. So especially if you give out stuff as a box for free, so like articles and all that sort of stuff, bring in those people, because then you've already brought down that barrier, and they already think, oh, they like, just because I'm not like giving them my hard-earned dollar, I can kind of still be part of the community. That's really cool. And then again, that's another avenue they're going to come into it. So yeah, especially going down the online stuff, it's a different kettle of fish. It is a different beast to end up tackling, but it's something that you can really, really harness some new members from.
Yeah, you're right. And your members all, in my experience anyway, your members do your marketing for you, do your selling for you, because invariably when you sit that person down and say, hey, watch this class, like I used to do as well all the time, then invariably members would start filtering in ready for the next class. And they'd be like, because we had that rule, it was a joking one, but I used to enforce it quite rigorously, which was, if you don't recognize someone, you better go and introduce yourself inside of 30 seconds. Otherwise I'm going to give you like 50 burpees, just as a bit of a joke. But it was, and so as a result of it, like my members were just well versed in, as soon as they saw someone they didn't know, they'd be straight over and be like, hey, how are you? And introduce themselves, and then just strike up a conversation. And invariably you just find that person's just like made, 5 new acquaintances, and those 5 new acquaintances have probably just battered their shed about how much they love it there and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they become your sales team for you straight out the gate, and it was brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. Like, especially, you come in and you get that community of people that come into the same classes, and you're like, oh, this is around about the time that I'm going to want to train. And then 5 people's names and, what they do for a living. You're like, oh, okay, Karl, can I pay for a drop in? Like, I've only got my work boots on, but can I jump in?
Yep. Yeah, that's it, mate.
It's awesome, man. Like, what made you want to jump on the seminar staff?
Realistically, at the start, I didn't even think that it was a pathway. Like if it was the seminar staff or the seminar staff, they were these big names in CrossFit, the ones that were, you looked up to. They were obviously talented at what they do, but they were like huge names. And I didn't even realize that it was a job that was even able to get. I went for my level 2 and passed that in 2007. And when we came back from that, me and my business partner, Mark, who ran CrossFit Manchester, we were in communications. We're trying to get a level 1 over in the UK. And so we managed to get that. We managed to get the first level 1 outside of the continental US to come to Manchester, which was pretty cool. So we got them to come over. And so in the communication pieces of that, there was, so obviously Nicole, and training director Nicole Karl, she's the main point of contact. And she was saying, like, I was doing main communications with her. She's like, oh, we'll be here at this certain amount of time. Can you be there to be like our point of contact? And I just thought that meant glorified T-boy, put chairs out, like help us out with the day-to-day running while they did the big stuff. And so I sat there in the meeting, and then they started going through the daily brief of assigning roles, responsibilities, that kind of stuff. What I now know is standard on the seminar staff, but at the time I didn't know. And so I was kind of zoned out a little bit, and they were just giving out all of these things. So like, group 1's going to be so-and-so, group 2's going to be so-and-so. And they were rigging it all out. And then they were like, Karl, group 4. And I was, what? And they were like, yeah. So, and anyway, I kept quiet, I'm just like, okay, I have no idea what's going on, but okay. True CrossFit fashion at that time, just got thrown under the bus. Nicole just took me to the side and said, hey, I saw you coach on your level 2. Did a really good job. In fact, if you were in the US, we would have invited you to come and intern for the team. But we're interested in developing a European team. So we'd like to see how you do in this environment. And I was like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I could have done with some prep time. That would have been a bit ideal, rather than just getting thrown under the bus. But okay, whatever you want, boss. So ended up doing that for the next 2-3 days with those guys, with a couple of others. And then at the end of that, Nicole said to me, oh, that was a really good job. We'd like to see you do it a bit more formal next time. So we're going to Sweden, Stockholm, February the following year. And I was like, oh, okay. So this seminar was in 08, I think this was September, something like that, 08. And then I got the next seminar was February 09. And luckily enough, I was born in Stockholm, so I know the city well. And my mum still lives there. So it was like, yeah, okay, that's no drama. She's like, can you make your way to this address? Like old school kind of spy shit. Like, can you make your way to this address on this date at this time? And I was like, yep, I can do that. So turned up on that time. And that was a more formal as per like the internship that we know it as now, where I was assigned a trainer assessor, which was jointly Nicole Karl and a lady called Jenny Orr, who's an amazing trainer. And they even gave me a proper t-shirt and everything. Had like an intern t-shirt, and there was another 3 characters on that course as well. And we all went through like the weekend, just literally running everything, getting thrown under the bus. And then at the end of the 2 days, they were like, oh, good. So we'd like to offer you a job. And I'm like, fucking cool. And they were like, and you get paid for it. I'm like, even fucking better. I would have done it for free. So yeah, that began the process, man. They just, then I think my first formal seminar, like wearing the red shirt, even though it was orange at the time, had some crappy Adidas dry tech thing honking. But anyway, yeah, I had to go Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and that began the journey, man. Yeah, it was ever since then it just started accelerating with the amount of seminars in Europe, and it went from once a month or once every couple of months to every weekend fairly rapidly. So from about 2010 onwards, it was a full-time job. If you wanted it, like the work opportunity was there. So it rapidly became every weekend, sometimes multiple weekend, and the staff started growing. But yeah, in that time, I was just trying to balance the day-to-day running of the gym. Obviously we had 2 kids in that period of time as well. So we had a lot going on, as well as working for the seminar staff. But yeah, that was a very short version of how the staff thing came about. I guess I didn't really apply for it. I was just around to help at the right period of time, and became part of the original European crew. There was 4 of us. There was me, a guy called Mads Jakobsen, a lady called Courtney Rife, who still works for the seminar department, and another guy called Oliver Amdrup, who actually started up and still owns what was Pure Pharma and is now Puori. So he's a very successful business guru.
Yeah. Damn. So it's been, what was it, 2008?
The original Awesome Foursome, of which Courtney. Go ahead, man.
That was no, I was just gonna say that was 2008, right? So that's what, like 12 years?
Yeah, it was '09. February '09 was the seminar where I got given the green light to be a member of staff. Yeah, so February '09, and then from then on, yeah, I've always been on seminar staff. Had a couple of months off when my kids were born, just because it was a bonkers time to try and manage it. But other than that, yeah, it's been pretty much every weekend, like high 40s work weekends most years, until 2020, obviously.
Yeah, what's it been like? Like, you know, you must have lived in an airport and on a friggin' plane and all over the place. And what's it been like? You know, sort of sitting down and be like, oh, well, I don't need to go catch a flight.
It's, you know, I now hate travel. Like, I hate airplanes. I hate hotels. I hate that shit. Like, it just winds me up, like, because I've spent so many hours upon hours upon hours across the years. For others, I know they look forward to it because they don't do it all the time. But for me, it was a weekly occurrence. Like leaving the family, going to an airport, hotels, like transit, this, that, and the other, being away from home, eating out, all that kind of stuff. It sounds romantic and it sounds kind of exciting. And I guess it is for a short period of time, but when it's every single time, it kind of sucks. So, being home, especially over lockdown, especially over COVID, that was the longest I'd been home for a period of time in 12 years. And I loved it. Utterly loved it. Like we set home with the kids more often, home with the missus. We set good little habits in place because we went all over the place with having to like be at airport or do this for travel, or nutrition got squared away, training was real good. No, it's huge positives for me, mate. The only drama, I guess, was income, really, because we'd given up running the gym full time and sold that years back. So our sole income was seminar work, and if you don't work seminars, you don't have any income. So that navigating that minefield, which is not unique to me. I think many people have found themselves in that place over 2020. So just figuring that out has been challenging, but like any good company and like any good thing, it adapts, right? So CrossFit's adapting, and it's got like the online level ones, which are a trip. They're fun to do. And so, you diversify and you find other ways of doing the work. So it's, yeah, it suits purposes. It's not been too bad, but it's been great being home for a big period of time.
It serves as like a massive rest period, I guess. Like it's a little bit of a breath of fresh air, and you're still able to do things like you said. Would have brought in the online level one, but I bet it would have been really nice, mate. Like, traveling every weekend, doing that, going to different cities would be sick if you're like a bachelor, but you got two kids and a wife back home, and you like being home. It must be a bit tricky, mate.
Yeah, I mean, you get a little smarter with work choices and work allocations if you can, right? So I'd always used to be, wherever I was sent, I would go. So be like, yeah, no dramas. Where do you need me to go? And you're like, oh, cool, Japan for a weekend. Like, awesome experience, but that travel would just savage you for a couple of days afterwards. And then you'd be like, okay, where do you need me to go next? And it's like Greece. And you're like, well, okay. So, you'd be here, there, and everywhere. And there was never really a chance to kind of catch up. And over the time, and as the team expanded, it got better because you got a lot more localized. So therefore you just spend a lot of time running around Europe in particular, which was great. And then, just before COVID struck, we got super smart where all we were doing was selecting predominantly UK based gigs. And that was almost going to be almost like a holiday, right? Like home on a Sunday night and Friday night leaves and stuff. It was ideal, but then COVID struck, and then it was like, oh damn, then you just had to end up going where you want. And I mean, it's I think it drains you after a while when you've got such extreme long hauls all the time. Like you'd be down to South Africa and then back home, then you'd be like Dubai and then back home, and then you'd be like Far East and then back home. And then even just traveling around Europe, depending on how well the connections were, you could just spend hours upon hours upon hours on multiple plane rides and layovers and stuff. So it would leave its mark, like it would. And I mean, you'd forget it as soon as you did the seminar, because the seminar was the great piece. You got to meet like-minded folks and do the work and enjoy a great 2 days. And that was always great. It was just the surrounding stuff it started to get a little wearing, you know. But hey, it just making it sound like my diamond shoes were too tight. You know what I mean? It's still the best job I've ever had.
Nah, mate. Like, you know, there's holes in everything, and you know, I say similar things to people born over here, right? They complain about some things, and I'm like, seriously, like, mate, if you could imagine like growing up on the west side of Manchester, like it's a bit different. But if you're born in paradise, you end up picking holes in it, you know, like you can have too much of a good thing because it becomes a bit of a hindrance. So I completely understand that. I don't think you're bitching and moaning about, you know, sort of your diving shoes.
There we go. Still there, buddy? I think you might have dropped out a second there.
Still here, brother. Still here.
Yeah, gotcha.
Last part, man. I've got a couple of quick fire questions for you, so you can get back to the family. I know it's your evening time, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Favorite movement, brother? What is it?
Bar muscle up.
Oh, nice. Favorite workout?
I'm a bit of a fan of Nasty Girls, to be honest. I do like that workout. It's good mix of stuff.
Yeah. Disgusting. Least favorite movement?
Oh, handstand walking, just because I'm utterly shite at it and I don't spend the time to get better at it. So I shouldn't expect miracles, but there you go.
Yeah, sure. Least favorite workout?
Anything that involves me standing in one place and shifting tin, you know, like I can't rely on anything that I'm good at. So, you know, just Linda for me is an absolute nemesis workout. DT, well, Grace less so because it's not too bad loading wise on a barbell, but like the extra 10 kilos for DT and the mix of movements and things on like Linda, they put me in the locker so hard. Those things, just staying in one place and lifting tin. Yeah, definitely.
Like it was, who was it? Dan Bailey and Calipri. They did the iron triathlon, didn't they, back in the day?
Nightmare.
That
Absolute
looks
nightmare.
absolutely horrific.
Yeah, it's at no way, shape, or form do I ever want to do something like that again. Kalsu is close too. Kalsu is an absolute stinker of a workout. Absolute stinker. Robbie Lawson made me do that in the lunch break on a seminar once in Ireland, and I took so long to do it that the entire participants ended up coming back from lunch and I was still going, and I got the slow clap across the line because like I was literally absolutely dangling. It took me about, I don't know, the entire lunch break. Cheers, Rob.
It is dirty though, and Kalsu is one of the most horrific things you'll ever do. Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Ooh, controversial. I know you're a whiskey man, so what's your favorite whiskey?
Oh man, that is a tough one because it all depends on what my vibe is on that day. You know, some days if the weather's real shit and cold, you want something peaty that's gonna like rip your lungs out, and then there's other days where you want something a little more calm. I think if I probably had to, one that I'd always go back to is Talisker. Talisker, just a regular good Talisker. I'll take.
Nice. Favorite movie?
Ooh. That is tough. there's like ones that you always go back to, you know what I mean? Like that you'd watch time and time and time again. So I'd probably have to choose one of those, to be honest, more than like, you know, I remember seeing Saving Private Ryan way back in the day and being like, what, this film is like, it's amazing. But I haven't seen it for a long time. But there's films like The Guardian. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. That's pretty cool, about the Coast Guard rescue swimmers with Ashton Kutcher and Kevin Costner. And that's decent. Got a good message behind it as well. Oh, Remember the Titans. I can just start seeing them all and just be like, oh yeah, and that one. Oh yeah, and that one. Oh yeah, and that one. So I couldn't really narrow it down. Even if somebody said like a top 10, I'd probably change them every day, to be honest. I know those ones would be pretty high up though, I think. The Point Break as well, the original one. I mean, cheesy, but fucking brilliant film.
It's got to be one that you can repeat all the time.
Yeah, let's say Point Break. Let's go for that one.
Point Break, nice. Favorite book?
Yeah, I could watch that now. Ooh. There's a few there, mate. I'm a big reader. One that really had impact on me is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That's an amazing book. Like just the perspective that dude had, you know, like, cause he was a psychologist anyway. And he could look on, you know, he could apply that principle in a concentration camp for a start, and was like, hey, the only difference between those that decided to die and those that didn't was just they decided not to, you know, like it was crazy, just that little look into the human psyche. And like every single year at Christmas, there would be loads of people would just die because they gave up, you know, it would be over by Christmas. And then when it wasn't, their head went and they died, you know, and you're like, damn, just that ability to have that clinical way of looking at something in the world's worst situations, I thought was, that had a lot of, like, I still remember it now, where he said, like, between stimulus and your response is the only freedom that you ever have. And I thought that was really profound, you know, like that's the only freedom that you have, how to respond to that situation, no matter how shit it is or how good it is. That's the only freedom that a man truly has, is being able to decide what to do based on that stimulus. It's the only freedom you have as a man. I was like, fucking hell, like that's pretty damn profound. So it's a real short read. It's a real small book, but that really impacted me a lot, and the way that I viewed a lot of stuff. So pretty cool.
I've recently been told to read that book by a good mate of mine. He said it's incredible, and it hit him in the face just like it did yourself. And he was like, look, it's a tough read, but it's incredible. So, you know, get on it. This one's a bit of a deeper one. What does leadership mean to you?
Ooh. Oh. That's a fun one. So many things. I mean, it's like good leadership characteristics is how you can support your team. You know, it's not, you know, there's a difference between being a boss and a leader, right? A boss tells, a leader shows. So you've got to lead by your own actions. You got to support your teammates. You got to set them up for success. You know, like there's another book that I read recently which really helped me with this, because I could never really dig into it, but it was like, how do you get the best out of your team? And it was called Turn the Ship Around. It was a really good book, and it was actually about a guy who went in as the commanding officer on a naval submarine, like a nuclear deterrent submarine, and he just switched out how he wasn't like the boss and he would tell people what to do. As he empowered the people in his command to be like, well, take ownership of your job role and come and tell me what you intend to do, and then I'll give you the yes or the no based on that. And it was just that subtle switch in, like, they weren't then just waiting for their boss to tell them what to do and be micromanaged at every single stage. He empowered them to actually be in charge of their jobs and be like, just tell me what you intend to do. So, you know, chief of the watch would come up and be like, hey boss, I intend to take the boat down to here. This has been squared away. That's been squared away. I've chatted with so-and-so and this is where we're at. So happy to do that. And he'd be like, yeah, good to go. Make it so, you know, like make it happen. So he wasn't saying, hey, chief of the watch, take the boat down, tell so-and-so to do this, tell so-and-so to do this, because it's like, that's a boss, right? That's not a leader. And so it was a very subtle way of just being like, oh, I really dig that, you know, like just being able to, how do you because like in our seminar team, they're all rock star trainers. They don't need to be force fed. You know, they don't need to be kind of like told what to do or micromanaged, you know, or tell me what you intend to do. So from like a miniature, tell me how you intend to run this next station, or how you intend to run this pull-up rotation when we've got COVID restrictions. What's your plan? And if they're like, they tell you your plan, you'd be like, cool, good to go execute it. You know, like simple stuff like that. I think it's a lot of, then you generate better leaders through their own actions rather than just followers, you know what I mean? Who will just like sit there and wait to be told what to do. So I guess it's about empowering people to take their own leadership decisions, and you support that along the way and lead by your own actions. Probably those things is what I think leadership is.
That's really powerful, man. That's really powerful. Like, if I was to name one person that is the epitome of the pursuit of excellence, your name will come up. So what makes you do that? What makes you every day, like we all have different whys, right? You know, you've heard, what's your why? But within the sort of realm of CrossFit, we are trying to pursue that virtuosity, like we say. What makes you do it?
Yeah. I think it's just being afraid of being shit. You know, like it's just this overwhelming fear of just being crap at something that I've invested so much of my time on. I mean, like I'd like to think, I know I'm biased, but I think CrossFit has genuinely legitimized the job role of the professional trainer, you know, and made it more widely available. Like they're not the only ones that have done it, but they've definitely brought it a lot more wide, like more mainstream and widely known to be a professional trainer. Before it was like, you what? Yeah, okay, you're just doing that until you get a proper job. Whereas now it's like, no, you can be a professional trainer. And I think the fear was, well, I'd better start being a fucking professional then. You know, like I'd better actually treat this like a profession, because there's no, if it was a fear of getting, I guess, found out more than anything, right? Because especially in a job role like working for seminar staff, because there's about 1 million people who take your job in a heartbeat too. So if you weren't improving and if you weren't shit, then you'd lose your job. And I really like my job. So I was like, well, you better stop being shit then and keep pushing. And so I was lucky that I enjoyed reading. And so reading about my craft and reading in general wasn't a hard ask. I didn't have to like carve the time out for doing it. I just genuinely like reading and learning. But more so than that, I enjoyed the doing. So I think it was a little bit of both, but genuinely just based out of, I wanted to be really good at training. I just wanted to have really good eye for faults. I needed to develop it because that's a craft too. That's a perishable skill. I wanted to be able to teach well, and I wanted to genuinely make a difference for the people I was coaching too. So that was the main drive, just trying to help others. And to do that, you've got to look at what you do a lot harder, right? Because it's too easy. Everybody tells you you're great when you coach them, and that's not really ideal, you know, because everyone goes like, oh yeah, you're a great coach. And you're like, well, thanks. And that's great for my ego, but that's shit for my development. So it's that piece where you kind of hear the platitudes and the nice words, but you immediately fuck them off and start figuring out how you need to be better. Was the main thing for me. So yeah, that was the main thing. How can I be better for others? Because that's how you be professional, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That is a really big sort of problem of being able to, and a challenge being able to professionalize coaching, and how do you standardize it and all that sort of stuff. And you know, the pursuit of excellence, I think, is the way forward, and always looking into yourself internally and be like, how can I end up forging my package that I can create for other people better and better and better and better. And that's, you know, that's what corporate systems do with their system and the cog in the wheel and all that sort of stuff. We just do it with a barbell and walking on the hands like bloody monkeys.
That's right, mate.
There you go. All right, last one. Describe yourself in 5 words.
Oh, totally shit at CrossFit. That's 4. Really totally shit at CrossFit. There you go.
Oh, I fucking love it. To be honest, like I think one of the things that made the level 1 for me was I came back after dinner time and you lot are training. I think that made it for me. Simply, it was just like these people are showing that they're human, are doing what they're saying, and it's just like fair fucks. And I can also see, I'm like, oh, they're hurting as bad as I'd hurt. Wicked, no problem.
Oh yeah, mate.
Right.
Yeah, it's credibility, isn't it?
Yeah, for
Speaks
sure.
towards it. You know, like I think as trainers, nobody really expects you to be the best in the world, because if they did, that's kind of daft anyway. You know, like what does that mean? Does that just mean that everybody, if you're Matt Fraser, you're the best coach? You know, that's not the case. He might well be, but more often than not, those that are really great at something aren't always the best coaches. So the main thing is no one is really looking for you to be absolutely excellent at everything. They look to you to simply just be in it with them. You know, so that's why it's important that as a trainer, you do your own programming as an example, right? That you don't have to be posting up the fastest times of the day or the heaviest loads, but your name should be up on the whiteboard along with everybody else, because it just shows credibility. It shows that you're in that fight with everybody else. And that's all they want, right? That's more that is community. No one really cares. They just care that you're in the fight with them.
That's powerful, man. Like, you know, coaching and athlete are 2 different crafts. And if you go down one side, that it doesn't really benefit the other. Yes, you can you understand the feeling that those people might be feeling simply because you've pushed to the nth degree. However, the coaching side hasn't had any food. You've not fed that wolf. For sure. Right. Really, really appreciate your time, man.
There are obvious exceptions. No, go on.
No, after you.
No worries, buddy.
Are we still here? Have I been kicked out again?
No, he's still there, mate. I heard you.
All right, legend. Sorry, what were you saying, mate? I interrupted with the old laggy system.
Oh, no worries at all, mate. I was just saying there are obvious exceptions where you have like high level coaching and a high level athlete, but more often than not, it's one or the other, right? It's kind of hard to develop both at the same time, which is exactly what you said.
Yeah, and if you do, you end up having absolutely zero social life, and you're an absolute hermit living under a rock and only live in a gym.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah. Nah, lad, honestly, the Godfather of European CrossFit, that is the name I give you. And anyone else would agree with me. I really, really appreciate your time, mate. And I absolutely loved both me level 1 and me level 2. And you took them both in CrossFit Central Manchester, same gym, great gym. Really enjoyed that community and where it is. Plus, it's the greatest city on earth. No one can deny it. So I honestly really appreciate your time, mate. If you need anything, you let me know. And maybe you can bring the family over for a little bit of a jet and of a holiday over here.
Hey, I'd love to. New Zealand's on the bucket list for sure, mate. It's just being allowed out of our houses, I guess, is the first obstacle, eh?
Yes, it is, mate. Yeah. Yeah, fuck knows whenever that sort of lifts up, but hopefully it's pretty sometime soon.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Good talking to you, bud.
Look after that family, and I really appreciate your time, lad.
No worries, mate. We'll speak soon, all right?
Legend. Peace.